Welcome to ND Love Story Channel. If you like this story, please subscribe and like the video. Please listen to the following story. I hadn't planned on stopping that night. The rain came fast, steady and cold, soaking through my hoodie before I even crossed the street. I ducked into the Hollow Bean, my usual late-night cafe, more out of instinct than intention. The place was nearly empty. A mellow jazz track played in the background. I headed to my usual corner table, pulled out my laptop, and tried to focus on finishing a design mock-up for a client's website. But my brain wasn't cooperating. Then the door swung open. I glanced up. A man walked in, shaking rain from his leather jacket. He had that presence, tall, broad-shouldered, calm but alert. The kind of guy you don't just see, you feel. His eyes scanned the room and landed on the empty chair at my table. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice low and rich, with a bit of edge. I paused. "Go ahead." He dropped into the chair with practiced ease, setting a dark folder on the table. That's when I caught sight of it. A badge clipped to his belt, and next to it, a holstered gun. Big. Serious. My heart kicked a little faster. "I'm Jack," he said. "Detective. Just moved to the city." "Eli," I replied, "graphic designer. And not usually one for unexpected dinner guests." Jack chuckled. Me neither, but the rain cornered us both. There was something about him, maybe the way he carried himself, or how he watched me with real curiosity, not just politeness. He didn't talk to fill space. He actually listened. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About work, books, why Portland rains so damn much. His laugh came out rough and warm, and I realized I wanted to hear more of it. When we finally stood to leave, the rain had stopped. The streets shimmered under the glow of streetlights. "Can I walk you home?" Jack asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Sure. There was something there, a spark I couldn't name. I didn't know yet that this night would change everything, but I felt it, in the way our arms brushed, in the way the air felt lighter, in the way I couldn't stop thinking about the man and the gun he carried. It started with a text the next morning. "Jack, hey, hope you dried off. Still thinking about our accidental dinner." I stared at the screen longer than I'd admit. Then I replied, "Me, still recovering from the surprise seating arrangement." From there, we talked every day. Nothing heavy at first, memes, playlists, favorite coffee orders. Then deeper stuff crept in. Family, work stress, the weird comfort of rainy nights. I found myself smiling every time his name lit up my phone. 1 week later, Jack texted, "Up for a walk this weekend? There's a park by the river. Neutral territory." I said yes before I could overthink it. Saturday came, crisp and golden. The leaves were turning, spinning lazily on the wind. I got to Riverbend Park 20 minutes early and spent most of it pretending I hadn't. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Jack said as he appeared behind me, hands in his jacket pockets. He was in dark jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes pop. Civilian Jack. Less badge, more real. "I just got here. I lied." And he grinned like he knew better. We walked along the path, talking about everything and nothing. He asked about my work, and I explained how I see emotions as shapes, colors, movement. Design is like turning a feeling into something you can hold in your hands. He nodded thoughtfully. "That's beautiful. I envy that, being able to create something real from what's inside." "What about you?" I asked. "Why law enforcement?" His smile faded a little. "When I was 15, my sister was attacked. The detective who handled her case, he treated her like a person, not a victim. That stuck with me." He paused and added, "I want to be that for someone else." The air shifted between us. He looked vulnerable, unarmored. I wasn't sure what to say, so I didn't say anything, just kept walking beside him. A leaf fell between us. Red, perfect. We both reached for it at the same time, our fingers brushing. Neither of us pulled away. Eventually, I said, "I should head out. I've got a deadline." A soft half-smile crossed his face. "Right, deadlines." But he hesitated. "Eli, yeah, I've really enjoyed this. You, us." His voice dipped low. "Me too," I said, heart thudding louder than it should have. We walked back in silence, but something had changed. There was no denying it anymore. Something real was unfolding. 3 days after the walk in the park, Jack texted me again. "Jack, you like Italian?" "Me, who doesn't?" "Jack, dinner. My place. Tomorrow night. I promise not to poison you." "Me, sounds dangerously domestic. I'm in." I showed up at his apartment the next evening with a bottle of red wine I couldn't really afford and a heart that hadn't slowed down since I got the address. His place was in a converted warehouse in South Portland. Exposed brick, tall windows, the kind of place that suggested confidence without trying too hard. "It's open, come on up." His voice crackled through the intercom. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of garlic, herbs, and something creamy hit me in the best way. Jack stood barefoot in jeans and a plain black t-shirt, stirring pasta like he did it every night, which, judging by the setup, he might. "You cook?" I asked, handing him the wine. He glanced over his shoulder, smirking. "I solve crimes and make a killer carbonara. I contain multitudes." I laughed, trying to ignore the flutter in my chest. We moved around the kitchen and sink, me setting the table, him plating the pasta. Everything about the night felt weirdly natural, like this wasn't a first, like we'd been doing this for months. Dinner was incredible, but honestly, I was paying more attention to the way he listened when I talked, the way his eyes tracked my movements like they mattered. After the dishes were cleared, he offered the grand tour. His apartment was clean and masculine, dark wood, steel, soft lighting. But the surprise was on the wall in the living room. A gallery of black and white photographs. Street scenes, landscapes, portraits. One in particular caught my attention. An elderly man laughing mid-conversation. Face creased with joy. "That's my grandfather," Jack said, stepping behind me. "Taught me everything about character, about reading people." I turned to look at him. "These are amazing." "I've always loved photography," he said. "It's how I decompress after everything." "You're really talented," I said, meaning it. "It's like you capture the soul of the moment." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second the air felt too still, too charged. We were standing close, really close. I wasn't sure who leaned in first, but suddenly his lips were on mine. The kiss started slow, tentative, testing the waters, but then something shifted. The temperature rose. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me in. I responded in kind, fingers curling into his shirt, feeling the heat of his skin, the wine on his breath, the strength in his arms, the way our bodies aligned. It all felt right, too right. Just as things started to deepen, his phone rang. The ringtone was sharp, urgent. Jack pulled back, forehead against mine, breath unsteady. "I have to take this." He stepped into the kitchen, voice low but intense. I tried not to listen, but his tone said it all. "Something bad." He returned minutes later, tension carved into every line of his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's a situation involving an officer's weapon. I'm required to be on site." "Of course," I said, masking my disappointment. He hesitated for half a second, then pulled a small silver key from a drawer and pressed it into my hand. "Lock up when you leave?" I nodded, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't fully explain. He kissed me again, this time quicker, harder, as if trying to say everything he didn't have time to. Then he was gone. I stood there for a long moment, the key warm in my hand. This wasn't just a date. This was something more. And I wasn't sure if that thrilled me or terrified me. 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen evenings, shared takeout, and quiet mornings tangled in each other's rhythm. Then Jack invited me to the Police Benevolent Association Gala. "Our first official outing," he said. "You in?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to go, but because stepping into his world, the one with uniforms and hierarchy and reputations, felt like walking into a place where I didn't belong. Still, I said yes. I borrowed a charcoal suit from my roommate. He swore it made me look like I had main character energy. When Jack picked me up, he was in full dress uniform. I'd seen him in jeans, t-shirts, even half asleep in bed. But this He looked like someone out of a movie, or a memory I hadn't known I had. "You clean up nice, Hayes," he said, eyes lingering with approval. "You're not so bad yourself, detective," I replied, straightening his tie, mostly as an excuse to touch him. The Grand Pacific Ballroom downtown was all marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Everyone looked polished and professional. I felt not quite out of place, but like I was playing a role I had rehearsed. Jack kept his hand on my back the entire time, steady, grounding. "Jack," a woman's voice called out. She was tall, sharp-featured, and wore a navy dress that matched her captain's insignia. "Captain Rivera," he greeted her, tension threading his voice. "This is Eli Hayes." She looked me up and down, cool but not unkind. "So you're the reason Bennett checks his phone during meetings." I laughed lightly, only when I send memes. Jack added quickly, "Eli's a graphic designer. He's helping with some community outreach visuals." I blinked. We hadn't discussed going the cover story route, but I understood this was his world, and it wasn't simple. After she walked away, he turned to me. "I'm not hiding you. It's just complicated. Office politics." "I get it," I said, even though a small knot formed in my chest. Later, during dinner, a detective sitting beside me leaned in. "Jack's a good guy. Heard he's on the short list for major crimes." I didn't have time to process that before Jack returned and pulled me to my feet. "Dance with me," he said. I glanced around. "Here? Won't that raise some eyebrows?" "Let them talk," he said, taking my hand. We danced under the soft light, his hand firm at my waist. He didn't care who was watching. For that moment, neither did I. But then, shouting, movement, uniforms rushing toward the entrance. Jack tensed, immediately shifting into something sharper, more alert. "Stay here," he said. He disappeared into the crowd. 10 minutes passed, then 15. When he returned, his face was grim. "We need to go. Now." We moved quickly through the underground parking structure. Jack walked slightly ahead, scanning shadows, hand near his holster. "Jack, what's going on?" I asked. "We got a silent alarm trigger from the parking deck. It might be nothing, but..." A man stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. "Detective Bennett," he said, calm but with a tight smile. "Fancy seeing you here." Jack instantly pushed me behind him. "Martin Reeves," he said, "you're violating your restraining order." "You ruined my life," the man growled. "Took everything from me." "You assaulted a suspect in custody," Jack replied coldly. Then I saw it, the twitch of Reeves' hand toward his waistband. I whispered, "He has a..." "I know," Jack said, drawing his weapon in one swift motion. I froze. The gun, large, dark, gleaming, was aimed with terrifying precision, and Jack held it like second nature. I'd seen it once before. I'd thought about it more times than I cared to admit. But this was different. This was real. "Don't do this, Martin," Jack said, steady and calm. Sirens wailed in the distance. Reeves backed away slowly. "This isn't over." By the time backup arrived, he was gone. Jack holstered his weapon, then turned to me, his hand cupping my cheek. "You okay?" I nodded, but my heart was pounding. The night had started as a milestone. It ended as a reality check. This was Jack's world, and I was officially in it. Jack didn't come home that night. Not that I expected him to. There was paperwork, debriefings, an ongoing manhunt for Martin Reeves. I knew that. Intellectually, I got it. Emotionally, it felt like a door had quietly shut between us. The next few days were strange. His texts came later, shorter. Phone calls got postponed, then replaced with, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Something came up. I told myself not to overthink it, that he was just busy, that his world ran on chaos and unpredictability. But deep down, I felt it. He was pulling away. We finally saw each other 5 days later at my apartment. I made dinner. Jack barely touched it. When he finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. "I've been thinking," he said, pushing his food around his plate. "About the gala. About Reeves." I nodded slowly. "Okay. I hate that you were there for that." that you saw me like that. You mean doing your job? I asked. I mean holding a gun on someone with your name still in my mouth. His voice cracked a little. That's the ugliest part of what I do, Eli. You shouldn't have to carry that. Shouldn't that be my choice? He looked up, surprised. I'm not a child, I said gently. I don't want a highlight reel. If I'm in this, I want to be in all of it, even the messy, dangerous, late-night emergency parts. Jack leaned back, sighing. You don't know what it's like. Then tell me. I've seen relationships rot from the inside out because of this job, he said. The hours, the risk, the things we don't talk about. And yet, you kiss me anyway. I said, quieter now. You let me in. Don't shut me out now because it's inconvenient. He stared at me for a long moment. I care about you too much to drag you into my darkness. I reached across the table and took his hand. Maybe I could be the light, I said, barely above a whisper. Did you ever think of that? Something in his expression softened. Not all the way, but enough. He squeezed my hand. I've been an idiot, haven't I? A well-meaning one, I said with a small smile. That night, we didn't solve everything. There were still questions, still shadows, but he stayed, and when he fell asleep with his arm around me, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way forward together. 2 weeks later, Jack invited me to his parents' annual summer barbecue in the suburbs. It's no big deal, he said casually while tying his shoes. Just my entire extended family in one backyard, grilling too much food and asking too many questions. I blinked. Wait, you want me to meet your family? He looked up. Yeah, I want them to meet you. I smiled, but my stomach fluttered with nerves. His childhood home sat at the end of a tree-lined street, a cozy 2-story place with wind chimes on the porch and a smell of fresh-cut grass. His dad, a retired fire chief, greeted us with a handshake that turned into a hug. His mom insisted I help her in the kitchen within 5 minutes of arriving. His sister Olivia, an assistant day, grilled me about art school, then offered me wine when I passed her test. They were warm, intimidating, loyal, a family that loved hard. You're brave, Jack whispered to me later as I helped his mom slice pie. Mom's already planning what she's cooking next time you come over. Next time? I asked, teasing. He smiled. I'm not letting you go that easy. As the sun set and string lights flickered on, Jack and I slipped away to the porch swing out back. They really like you, he said, bumping his shoulder against mine. They're kind of amazing, I replied. No pressure or anything. We sat in silence for a few beats, the kind that felt full, not awkward. I looked over and saw something shift in his expression, something unspoken waiting to rise. I got the promotion, he said quietly. I blinked. Promotion? To major crimes. It's what I've been working toward for years. That's huge. I smiled, even though a sudden coldness bloomed in my chest. When do you start? In 2 weeks. He didn't meet my eyes. There's just one thing, he added. I already knew. Where is it? Seattle. The word landed like a stone between us. That's 3 hours away. I said, try and keep my voice even. I haven't accepted yet, he said quickly. I wanted to talk to you first. It's your dream job. Yeah, but so are you. He looked at me then, really looked. We're just getting started, Eli. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. My heart was pounding. When you're falling in, he started, then stopped. I turned toward him fully. Falling in what? He exhaled. When I'm falling in love with you. The world narrowed to the porch swing, the fireflies in the yard, the knot in my throat. I'm falling in love with you too, I said softly, the truth of it landing like lightning. We kissed, slow and steady, not like the first time or even the second. This one felt like a promise. But then, as always, reality found its way in. Jack's phone rang, that same sharp ringtone. He answered it with a frown, standing as he listened. Are you sure it's him? He said. I'm on my way. He ended the call, eyes finding mine. It's Reeves. They found his car abandoned near the waterfront. There are signs of a struggle. I stood too. Go. We'll figure out Seattle later. He kissed me once, quickly, urgently. I'll call you. I watched him jog across the yard, making fast, quiet goodbyes to his family. His mom came out beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. The hardest part isn't the danger, she said gently. It's choosing to love someone you know you'll worry about forever. How do you do it? I asked. You love them for who they are, not despite it, she said, and you trust them to come back. I nodded, watching Jack's car disappear down the street, and silently, I prayed that this wouldn't be the time he didn't. The call came at 3:27 a.m. Jack's name lit up my phone, and for a heartbeat, I thought the worst. Eli, he said, voice raw low. We found Reeves. I sat up. Is he? In custody, he said. It's over. Relief flooded through me, but I could still hear the exhaustion in his voice. Are you okay? Physically? Yeah. Mentally? I don't want to be alone tonight. Then come over, I said without hesitation. 20 minutes later, Jack stood at my door, looking like he'd lived a lifetime in a single night. Rumpled clothes, dark circles, eyes that had seen too much. I didn't ask questions right away. I just pulled him into my arms and held him. On the couch, wrapped in a blanket in silence, he finally spoke. We tracked him to an old warehouse. He tried to run, then tried to get me to shoot him. Suicide by cop? He nodded, jaw clenched. He had a gun. I had mine drawn. I almost did it, but I thought about you, about what I'd have to carry back to you if I pulled the trigger. I held his hand, gently tracing the knuckles. I'm glad you didn't, I said. Not just for him, for you. We fell asleep on the couch, limbs tangled, breath synced. And when morning light filtered in, I could feel something had shifted. Not broken. Solidified. Over coffee, Jack leaned against the kitchen counter and said, We need to talk about Seattle. I set my mug down. You've decided. I have, he said. Last night reminded me why I do this job. To protect people, to bring justice. That part won't ever change. But what I realize is none of it means anything if I'm doing it alone. I blinked. So? I turned down Seattle. What? I stepped closer. Jack, that was your dream job. I know, but they offer me something else. Lieutenant, Homicide Division, right here. It's a step forward, but it keeps me where I want to be. With me? I said softly. He nodded. Exactly. My heart thudded. Are you sure? I've never been more sure, he said. These past few months with you have shown me what matters. Connection, purpose, love. He said it like a fact, not a risk. I took his face in my hands. I love you too. 2 weeks later, I stood front row as they pinned a lieutenant's badge on Jack's uniform. He looked impossibly proud, and I swear I caught Captain Rivera's smile in my direction. At the reception, he kept me close, introducing me to every cop, admin, and city official who walked up. This is Eli, he said, over and over. My partner. No more lies. No more hiding. When Captain Rivera stopped by with 2 flutes of champagne, she raised an eyebrow at me. I assume keeping this one in line will be your full-time job now. I'm up for the challenge, I said, and Jack pulled me a little closer. Later that night, back at our apartment, I'd started moving the weekend before. We lay on the couch, limbs tangled once again. What happens next? I asked, quiet in the dark. We live our lives, Jack said. I chase bad guys. You make beautiful things. And we figure out the rest day by day. That's simple. I asked, smiling. He chuckled. Not simple. Not even close. But worth it. I looked at him. I can't promise I won't worry. About you, about your job. I can't promise it'll always be easy, he said. But I can promise I'll always come back to you. I kissed him softly, slowly. That's enough. He rested his forehead against mine. Home, he said. It's not a place. It's you. And I believed him. Because in that moment, Rainy Cafe to first kiss, quiet dinners to draw on guns, whisper confessions to a future full of unknowns, I realized something. Love isn't perfect. It's showing up anyway. It's risking. It's staying. We weren't flawless. We were real. And that somehow was more.